You blink against the late afternoon sun, now softer, more forgiving. It no longer glares, it glows. The Nile reflects like a pool of molten gold, and the palm trees stand taller, less slumped from the heat. Around you, the village breathes again. Children chase each other with the renewed energy of small people who've only just discovered gravity. Adults begin to stir too, slowly like dough rising. The nap did what it was supposed to do. It bought time. Time to stretch the day into something livable. But it wasn't just about physical recovery. No, sleep, for the ancient Egyptians, had layers. And as the temperature cooled and life resumed its rhythm, you remember something curious about these people. They didn't just sleep to survive. They believed it was a way to connect with another world. Literally, to the Egyptians, sleep was the little cousin of death, not in a morbid way, more like a trial run. In dreams, they believed your soul, the BA, could wander, could fly, could visit other souls, gods, even the land of the dead. Some people actually feared sleep more than death, because it was unpredictable. You might wake changed, or not at all, so people prepared. Rituals before rest weren't uncommon. They'd anoint themselves with oils, frankincense, myrrh, or, for the fancier crowd, blue lotus essence. Not just for scent, but because certain fragrances were thought to ward off bad spirits. You don't want to dream about Seth, god of chaos, while trying to get your 8 hours. Here's a mainstream fact. The Book of the Dead includes several sleeping spells. These weren't bedtime stories. They were invocations. You'd recite them, or someone would for you, to protect your dreaming self. Some lines were meant to ensure you didn't sail too far in the dream world and forget to return to your body, which relatable on Mondays. Now, the fringe detail. In some homes, people kept small statues of protective gods beside where they slept. Not just any gods. Specialized deities like Bes, a squat, lion-faced figure known to guard households, children, and, importantly, dreams. Bes was not elegant. He had a tongue sticking out and bug eyes, and probably looked like he'd eaten someone's leftovers. But that was the point. You don't want your dream guardian to look polite. You want something that scares off nightmare fuel. Historians still argue whether these practices were widespread or limited to the upper classes. Some papyri suggest even workers had protective amulets, while others claim dreaming rituals were a luxury of those with free time and literacy. But the consistency of the theme across centuries? That sleep wasn't passive. It was a nightly voyage. That part's hard to ignore. And speaking of voyaging, your sleeping space mattered. You're standing now in a modest bedroom. Or a sleeping alcove, really. These weren't grand chambers unless you were a pharaoh or a very lucky scribe. For most people, it was a small room with few openings and even fewer possessions. There might be a headrest, a folded linen sheet, a pot for water, maybe a small shrine. But if it was summer, like now, you're probably not sleeping inside at all. Nighttime brought relief, and many Egyptians took full advantage. They hauled their mats to rooftops. Flat roofs were common, especially in Thebes and Memphis, and they doubled as sleeping porches. You'd climb up with your bedding, settle under the stars, and let the breeze from the Nile lull you into slumber. You can picture it now. The sky ink black, full of stars they'd already named. Sirius, called Sopdet, rising in the east. The air so still you could hear the papyrus rustling across the river. Maybe there's a distant flute, or the soft braying of a donkey that hasn't accepted its bedtime. And up here, sleep hits different. There's no ceiling to press down on your thoughts. No thick walls to hold the day's heat. Just a vast night sky and the belief that somewhere up there the gods might be watching or visiting. Perhaps you dream of Anubis guiding you through the underworld. Or Hathor singing lullabies by moonlight. Or maybe just your grandfather yelling about someone stealing his sandals again. Because dreams didn't always make sense. But they mattered. Some people even recorded them. Scribes would keep dream journals of a sort. Not for introspection like today, but for divination. If you dream of a crocodile, it meant danger. If you dreamed of clear water, success. If you dreamed of eating too many figs, indigestion, probably. Temples had priests whose entire job was interpreting dreams. And yes, some dreams were even sent deliberately. Dream incubation, they called it. You'd sleep at a temple hoping for a divine message. Imagine that. Booking a room at the Temple of Horus because you're feeling indecisive about your harvest schedule. You lie down on cool stone, whisper a request, and hope that tonight your soul gets a visit. Not quite Airbnb, but probably quieter. Even among common folk, sleep held this undercurrent of meaning. Children were told bedtime myths not just to calm them, but to seed certain dreams. Sleep well, little one, they'd say, and walk with the hippo goddess, which, frankly, should be the new global goodnight phrase. There's a gentle dignity to it, isn't there? This idea that sleep isn't just rest, it's transit, that while your body cools beneath woven linen, your spirit is up there, hopping stars, dodging demons, asking the gods for directions and maybe just a little personal growth. You settle again, just imagining the rooftop mat under your spine. The sky blurs above you. A breeze teases your ankles. Someone nearby coughs softly, and then silence. Sleep here doesn't just come. It rolls over you like the Nile itself. Slow, steady, certain. And for just a moment, you wonder, where will you go tonight? Hey guys, tonight we drift back, way back, to the shimmering heat of ancient Egypt. The air ripples like glass. The Nile moves like a sleepy cat. And somewhere beneath a wide palm frond, you're trying not to sweat through your linen tunic. You already drank your beer, you've done your work, and now you rest. Because in a world where the sun hits like a hammer, sleep isn't just a break. It's a defense mechanism. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is it there? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin your walk to the haze of late morning, past loaves baking on hot stone and donkeys swatting flies with tired tails. The ground's already warm underfoot, and you can feel the heat climbing your spine like a smug little lizard. In ancient Egypt, the sun wasn't just intense. It was practically divine. Ra didn't mess around. He shone all day, and by noon, even the gods would have wanted a nap. And so did you, in most Egyptian homes. Daily life bent around the sun like reeds in a marsh. People rose early, worked while the air was still breathable, and then disappeared indoors or under trees as the sun reached its high noon tantrum. This wasn't laziness. It was logic. The Nile provided life, but the heat demanded rhythm. And that rhythm often included what we now call a tactical nap. You duck into a shaded courtyard, and it's like slipping into another dimension. The temperature drops a few degrees, and suddenly your bones remember what comfort is. A low mat is stretched in the corner, made of woven papyrus reeds, surprisingly springy. A clay jug sweats gently beside it, full of date beer or maybe just cool water with a sprig of mint. If you're lucky, there's a breeze, faint but kind, lifting from the river like a whisper. Here's a mainstream fact. Egyptians pioneered passive cooling before modern ventilation. Homes were built with thick mud brick walls that insulated from the heat. Windows were high and narrow, often covered with linen soaked in water to cool the air as it entered. Ingenious and quiet. But here's your fringe tidbit. There are carvings, little ones, easily missed, that show people actually napping with their feet in shallow basins of water. Toe-dipping naps. Imagine that. Not a full bath. Just a little Nile between your toes while you doze off. And you would nap. Not in your bed necessarily, but wherever made the most sense. Under a fig tree, beside your grindstone, on the temple steps if you were especially bold, or especially tired. Work stopped, conversation softened, and the entire town would go hushed, like someone turned the volume down on the world. Historians still argue whether these midday rests were formalized in any way, scheduled pauses like an ancient siesta, or whether they just happened because people reached a point of collective heat-induced surrender. Either way, the practice was widespread enough that even laborers on royal tombs had rest intervals built into their records. Yes, Pharaoh's tomb could wait. Heat stroke, not so much. Some of the most poetic papyri describe these rest times with phrases like, the still hour, or when the sun burns red behind the eye. Bit dramatic, sure, but then again, try hauling a granite slab at 2 p.m. without a nap. And for women working at home, grinding grain, kneading dough, sewing linen, this moment was sacred, a break from relentless chores. Children lulled to sleep with lullabies about hippos and crocodiles. Grandmothers fanning themselves with woven palm, eyes already closed. And if you're imagining opulent reclining on silk cushions, pause. Most naps were taken lying flat on palm leaf mats, heads resting on crescent-shaped wooden headrests, like a minimalist pillow or a neck puzzle. These weren't fluffy, but they kept your head cool and elevated. Probably helpful if you were surrounded by insects, gossip, or goats. Sleep wasn't always long. Maybe half an hour. Maybe a full hour if you were lucky or high status. But it gave you enough energy to finish the day, especially after a dinner of lentils and leeks and beer. Which, yes, is basically the menu of someone preparing to sleep again. It's funny. Today we think of napping as either indulgent or medical, like you're lazy or chronically sleep-deprived. But for ancient Egyptians, it was just life, like breathing or swatting flies or squinting at the sun. Sometimes even dreams were part of the ritual. There are stories of nappers waking with prophetic visions, having met with gods or long-dead relatives in the heat haze of afternoon sleep. Maybe that's just heat stroke. Maybe it's imagination. Or maybe the gods only whispered when the air was too heavy to run. You imagine lying there, eyes closed, breath slow, feet dangling over a basin, the scent of dried lotus and date oil in the air. Somewhere in the distance, a boatman shouts on the river, but here in the shade, the world melts to a hum. It's the kind of nap that erases time. And when you wake, the light is lower, the breeze is stronger, and you stretch like a cat who survived something, which, in a way, you've slept through the firestorm of Egyptian noon. Just don't forget your headrest when you stand. You're not quite ready to open your eyes, are you? That sweet, liminal haze after sleep, the kind that ancient Egyptians knew intimately. The mat beneath you is still warm from your body, the linen faintly scented with desert air, and a hint of whatever herbal oil you dabbed behind your ears the night before. You can almost hear the low murmur of someone grinding grain in the courtyard below, and the morning coo of pigeons pretending to be sacred. But don't get up yet. Not just yet. Because while sleep was a retreat from the heat, waking was its own delicate ritual. You didn't simply spring out of bed and start hauling bricks for the next pyramid. No. First, you had to re-enter the world. Reclaim your body from the dream realm. It was believed the soul, the BA, needed a moment to return. Waking too quickly might leave part of it behind. Like forgetting your shoes at a friend's house, except the shoes are your essence. This is why you often see depictions of stretching in Egyptian art. Those odd, angled poses aren't just stiff formalities. They show people reanimating, moving carefully, letting their spirits settle back into their limbs. You stretch too, arms over your head, and for a moment, you feel just like one of those painted figures on a tomb wall. A bit stiff, a bit sacred. And now, let's talk about water. No Egyptian morning routine skipped it. Not just for thirst. Though, yes, you'd be parched after a night on the roof. Water was essential for purification. You'd rinse your hands, your face, and, ideally, your mouth. Which brings us, dear sleeper, to an unexpected delight. The dawn of dental care. A mainstream historical fact. The ancient Egyptians were among the earliest people to develop a form of toothpaste. It wasn't minty. It didn't foam. But it was real. Recipes survive in ancient medical texts. Scrolls written in beautiful, angular hieroglyphs that look like tiny birds arguing about the best cleaning powder. So, what did they brush with? You'll love this. Powdered ox hose, crushed myrrh, burnt eggshells, and pumice. Sometimes a bit of ash. The texture? Probably somewhere between sandpaper and regret. But it worked. Sort of. The goal wasn't pearly whites. It was to scrape away buildup and keep the breath decent enough for polite temple visits. They didn't have toothbrushes like we do. Instead, they used a chew stick, a thin twig, frayed at one end, dipped into paste and rubbed vigorously against the teeth. Archaeologists have found several of these, still bearing faint traces of use. Imagine the first bleary-eyed Egyptian every morning, dutifully scrubbing away with what amounts to a mini paintbrush dipped in spicy gravel. And here's your fringe detail. One recipe, found on a papyrus from around 4th century BCE, claims to make the teeth firm and the mouth sweet. It includes rock salt, pepper, mint, and dried iris flower. Some scholars argue this was closer to mouthwash than paste, but others suggest it may have been dabbed on the gums like a balm. Historians still debate whether this was a medical formula or just high-end aromatherapy. Now, brushing your teeth on a sun that's already climbing, it was more than hygiene. It was protection. The mouth, they believed, was a gate. Let it fester, and you invite in illness, bad dreams, or even curses. So scrubbing the teeth wasn't just for dates and deity worship. It was spiritual maintenance. A daily battle against decay in every form. And remember, you weren't doing this in private. Egyptians didn't have separate bathrooms. Most of the hygiene rituals happened in shared courtyards or by riverbanks. So your morning breath check, public domain. Hope you like communal accountability. In wealthier homes, there might be a designated basin area, maybe even servants to help with oils and tools. But for the average person, you had a pot of water, a few twigs, a tin of pungent powder, and the hope that nobody walked by while you were mid-scrub. As the sun rises, more of the village joins the rhythm. You hear the splash of water on stone, the call of a priest reminding people that prayers begin at midday, chickens scratching in sand, and through it all, 100 mouths being carefully, reverently cleaned. In a land obsessed with the afterlife, even morning breath had eternal implications. And speaking of eternity, let's not forget the funerary angle. When archaeologists opened certain tombs, they found containers labeled for oral remedies. Some held powders. Others had dried herbs. There's one theory that these were packed alongside the deceased to ensure they entered the afterlife with clean teeth, sort of an ancient Egyptian travel kit. Because who wants to meet Osiris with spinach stuck between your incisors? One noblewoman, whose tomb was especially well preserved, had a small wooden box filled with dental tools, aromatic powders, and a compact mirror. A sleep kit or an eternity kit? Possibly both. There's a haunting charm in that, isn't there? The idea that something as ordinary as brushing your teeth was both deeply human and cosmically important. You didn't do it just to feel fresh. You did it because your ancestors were watching, because your gods had taste, because every morning was a ritual, and every ritual was a negotiation with the divine. And when you're done, when your teeth are scraped, your mouth rinsed, and your breath spiced with crushed flowers and powdered hoof, you don't just walk away. You sit briefly. You let the water dry on your skin. You watch the dust dance in the air and feel, in your bones, the slow weight of the day ahead, because it's going to get hot again. But for now, you're clean, whole, reassembled, and ready to face the sun. The light sharpens by the minute, pressing down to the haze with that distinct Egyptian force. Bright, but not warm yet, sharp but not cruel. Not yet. This is a sweet spot. The moment when even the oldest walls seem to stretch their shadows a little longer before being burned back to shape. You pad softly across a floor that's not so much a floor as it is a promise. Cool stone, maybe mud brick, maybe mosaic if you're fancy, kept cool from the night air and just begging to be walked barefoot. The kind of texture you can feel in your heel arches. This floor knows you. It has heard every whisper morning and creaked under every evening ritual for generations. Now, let's talk about timing. The ancient Egyptians, especially in the south where the heat grew more aggressive, were absolute masters of the nap schedule. This wasn't laziness. This was survival. You had 2, sometimes 3 windows of functional daylight. Morning work, post-lunch haze, and early evening cool. Sleep, believe it or not, was woven into all 3, strategically, ritually, and with deeply practical finesse. Mainstream fact? Egypt is one of the first recorded civilizations to treat midday rest as culturally embedded. In fact, inscriptions suggest that laborers on temple sites or field workers in grain districts had structured pauses, documented, sometimes even mandated by temple overseers. You don't fight the sun at noon. You bow out. You lie low. And not just lie. Recline. In shade. with intention. There's something profoundly elegant about how this was framed, not as idleness, but as wisdom. The midday nap had theological approval. Temples were built with shaded courtyards for rest and contemplation. Workers were told to find solace in silence. This wasn't just siesta, it was spiritual conservation. Of course, fringe tidbit. One papyrus, rarely cited outside dusty thesis papers, details the protocol of rest under Ra's eye. It's not exactly a nap manual, but it comes close. It describes a daily moment when humans should cease striving to allow Ra, the sun god, to observe the land without interference. Some interpret this as a metaphor for prayer. Others, just a very polite excuse for a nap. Historians still argue whether this document was religious canon or just temple HR policy with extra poetry. By mid-morning, your tasks must be chosen carefully. You could water plants, sort grain, polish something sacred, but anything involving fire, heavy stone, or prolonged standing, absolutely not. You know better. Or at least your sandals do. So instead, you prepare for the next big event of the day, lunch, followed by that sacred second sleep. Picture yourself in a small shaded room, maybe partially underground, called a serdab, often used for both storage and snoozing. It's quiet, cool, thick with the smell of herbs hung from beams. There's a small bench or mat, and, if you're lucky, an oil lamp flickering behind a carved niche. But most importantly, it's dark, not in a spooky way, in a padded, cotton-muffled sort of way, like being wrapped in dusk hours before the sun agrees to set. This is where the dream logic kicks in. The Egyptians believed that dreams were messages, not always divine, not always sensible, but always meaningful. And this nap, this midday sleep, was a perfect vessel for such messages. Not the heavy, symbolic dreams of the deep night, but shorter, sharper ones. Cat naps with prophecies. 30-minute visions of things you might want to do or avoid. There were even dream interpreters. People trained to take your half-formed sleepy nonsense and turn it into actionable advice. Imagine the drama. You wake up from a 20-minute lie down and go straight to your neighbor. I saw 3 birds and a wheel of cheese. Am I doomed? And she, with the gravitas of a well-rested oracle, replies, only if the birds were flying west. That actually happened. Sort of. An entire dream book, yes, it exists, was discovered on papyrus. One of its surviving sections categorizes dreams. To dream of bathing is good. To dream of baking is bad. To dream of turning into a crocodile means great power. Probably also bad for your social life. But they didn't include that part. Now you're dozing in your own midday slice of the underworld, lulled by distant sounds. The thump of a mortar, the flit of wings overhead, a goat probably doing something inappropriate to a basket. Time slips sideways. You feel your spine soften into the mat, and with full belly and faint sandalten on your feet, you slide easily into that nap. Let's stay here for a moment longer. Not asleep, not awake. Somewhere in between, like the Egyptians always aimed to be. Present enough to feel the cool air on your stomach. Distant enough to hear the voices of your dreams more clearly than the real ones outside. And when you wake, you won't rush. No, you'll sip something tepid. Dab a little oil on your wrists. Maybe check in with the dream interpreter. Was that ibis holding a scroll or fish? Important distinction. Because sleep wasn't just about escape. It was part of the day's rhythm. A conversation with time, where you agreed to step back for a while and let the heat pass over you, like a shadow, like a god. And so you rise gently, slowly, one joint at a time. The sun's past its peak now. And you're ready for part 2. The air's different now. You feel it before you even step outside. Not cooler. No, never cooler, but altered somehow. Less threatening. The shadows grow longer again, stretching their limbs across courtyards and mud brick walls like lazy cats. The sun has passed its peak, and the heat, while still bold, begins to loosen its grip. You're not the only one who notices. The whole village begins to stir, gently, like a hive reawakening after the smoke has cleared. Children reappear, barefoot and loud. Merchants begin to retie their awnings, adjusting their displays. And you go looking for water. Because the afternoon phase of ancient Egyptian life was, in many ways, the water phase. Mainstream historical fact. The Egyptians were expert water managers, not just in grand irrigation projects or Nile-wide divination festivals, but in daily, domestic strategy. Rain was laughably rare, so everything came from the Nile, either drawn, scooped, or soaked into jars and pots and little linen-wrapped clay bulbs designed to stay cool. Fringe tidbit time. One recent excavation uncovered what may have been a kind of personal water chest buried beneath a sleeping platform. Essentially, a pottery-lined pit that could hold a pot of water at just the right coolness for post-nap refreshment. Archaeologists are still debating if it was meant for hydration, spiritual anointment, or just to show off to jealous neighbors. But still, underground water stash? That's commitment. You tilt the jug. The water's cool. Not icy, obviously, but surprisingly pleasant. You pour a little into your cupped hands. Splash it across your face. A sigh escapes your lips. Not because you were panting. Just because it feels good to feel again. Now begins what some might call the soft work window. Post-nap tasks were lighter, slower, and more reflective. You might grind grain. You might mend cloth. You might carve a little something decorative into a clay pot if you're feeling ambitious. No one's running. No one's arguing. Even the livestock seem to tiptoe. It's like the whole world agrees to be politely productive for a few hours until sunset resets the mood. And here's the bit you've been waiting for. The evening pre-sleep ritual. Yes, more sleep. Or at least, the beginning of it. Because for the ancient Egyptians, bedtime wasn't a cliff you fell off. It was a gentle descent. A ritual of shedding in soothing and strategic darkness. You don't simply flop onto a bed. Not that most people even had beds. You ease your body into readiness. First, there's oil. Sweet-smelling or sometimes pungent. Rubbed onto dry skin baked by the day's dust. Applied to the scalp. Dabbed on the neck. The oils did double duty, moisturizing, yes, but also preparing you for the dream world. Because remember, sleep was not escape. It was transition. Next scent, some use myrrh, others lotus. You might tuck a fragrant reed behind your ear, or hang a sachet of herbs from your neck, or sprinkle crushed petals onto your linen roll. There's even evidence that wealthier homes kept dream boxes, small card containers with perfume cloth and tokens to ensure safe travels through the sleep realm. Think of it like an ancient dream kit. Historians still argue whether these were ceremonial or just proto-sleepy time marketing ploys. Then, posture. If you're fortunate, you have a wooden headrest. Not a pillow, a carved support shaped like a stretched S. It cradles the neck while keeping the head elevated, supposedly to help with breathing and spiritual clarity. Or, more practically, to keep your carefully oiled hair from getting dusty. If you're not so fortunate, it's a mat on the ground. But even then, the care is the same. Lay down with intention. Align the body. Align the breath. Face the appropriate direction if you're of a pious mindset. And finally, there's the invocation. This part's optional, but common. A soft chant. A muttered phrase. Something about passing through the doors of night with clean hands. You're not summoning anything. You're informing the universe that you are respectfully withdrawing. Now, before we fully drift, a little oddity. Some archaeological evidence suggests certain households kept dream guards, small figurines or amulets placed at the head of the sleeping area. These weren't gods, exactly. More like friendly watchers. Half cat, half crocodile, half who knows what. Creatures that existed only in the dream borderland. Their job? To scare off the nightmares. Or at least confuse them long enough for you to sleep through it. You lie back. You watch the last streak of sun curl itself over the lip of your doorway and vanish. The air shifts again, cooler now truly, and you hear a nightjar start song. Faint, raspy, like the voice of someone only half remembered. And in that perfect stillness, just before the stars punch through the sky's fading blue, you realize something. The Egyptians didn't fear the night. They didn't fight the heat. They danced between them, stepping lightly from wakefulness to sleep and back again, always attuned to the land's rhythm, always aware that rest wasn't wasted time. It was sacred, And in that final hour, when the only thing louder than silence is a thought you carry into sleep, you press your hand to the cool earth beside you, breathe deep, and let go. You don't fall asleep. You pass into it, just as they did. Your eyes open again, not to bright morning light, but to the cool, secret hush of pre-dawn. There's something distinctly different about the world before sunrise. The heat has not yet laid its heavy hand on the land, and for this brief stretch of time, the air itself feels like it's holding its breath. In the distance, you hear it, a faint splash. Then another. You rise slowly, bones creaking from the firmness of your reed mat or the slight imprint of your wooden headrest. No matter. The body is used to this. This is a sacred hour. The one claimed not by kings or priests, but by the workers, the water bearers, the bakers, the ones who move before RA begins his skyward journey. In the coolness, the Nile becomes a thread of life again, not an obstacle or an inconvenience, but a giver of calm. Fishermen are already crouched near the banks. Women kneel beside clay jars, gently lowering them into the river to gather the day's supply. And in more elite homes, servants quietly enter courtyards, drawing water from stored cisterns, preparing the compounds for daybreak. Mainstream historical fact? The ancient Egyptians aligned much of their agricultural labor to this window of cool. Scribes and officials might still be asleep, but the field hands, the millers, the grinders of grain, they were already halfway through their first task before the sun dared show its face. Fringe tidbit? A papyrus fragment found near modern-day Asiut includes what seems to be a pre-dawn chant for protection against heat demons, entities believed to lurk just beyond the eastern horizon, vanquished only by the sunrise. Was it metaphor? Literal fear? Historians still argue whether this was mythology or an early poetic attempt to explain dehydration and heat stroke. Either way, the chant ended with, "Let the morning light pass over me like cool linen." You walk toward the kitchen space. Kitchen may be too generous. Most homes had a hearth, a grinding slab, a few storage vessels, and a basket or two for bread or lentils. And yet, there's something ceremonial about this moment. The first smell of flour in the air, the grind of pestle against grain, a soft rhythm, not frantic, just steady, as if the house itself knows not to make sudden moves until the heat returns. Even here, sleep lingers like perfume. You notice it in the way people stretch between tasks, like cats shifting from nap to hunt. It's not that anyone wants to go back to sleep. It's that no one has fully left it. In Egypt, morning doesn't pounce. It seeps. You might sit with a bit of beer bread and a handful of dates. You might rinse your face with cold water, though not too much. Sopping wet hair is no one's friend in the desert chill. And this is the hour for quiet choices. Will you walk to the granary? Will you help turn the irrigation shadow from the fields? Or will you, like some spiritual devotees, visit a small shrine and offer incense while the sky is still unsure whether to be blue or gold? And here comes a tiny, delightful absurdity, a form of early sleep diary. Yes, really. Archaeologists have uncovered pottery shards with short, scratch notations that seem to reference dreams. Not full descriptions. Mind you, more like cryptic tweets. Things like, "Was chased by ibis, not mine." Or, "The moon spoke with a woman's voice." Avoid figs. Some believe these were passed between friends as a kind of game. Others suggest they were sincere attempts at decoding divine messages. The line between superstition and entertainment was often blurred. One particularly charming ostracon simply reads, "Dreamed I was bred. Everyone was kind. Make of that what you will." So what happens now? Well, if you're fortunate, the next hour passes in the same soft tone. If you're less fortunate, it's already time to report for labor, temple construction, administrative scribal work, or canal dredging, depending on your station in life. But even then, the softness lingers. Most tasks before mid-morning are undertaken with calm efficiency. The sun isn't yet cruel. The earth hasn't yet baked itself into stone. And your body, fresh from its night's sleep, still remembers the ease of dreams. You pass someone carrying lotus stems, perhaps headed to market or to an offering table. You catch their scent as they pass. Sweet, slightly muddy, alive, And again you're reminded, everything about early Egyptian sleep was a conversation with the environment. Heat light sent silence, they all spoke, and people listened. Even architecture whispered instructions. Homes were designed with airflow in mind. Narrow upper vents, light-colored plaster, shaded courtyards. The goal wasn't just daytime comfort. It was also to ensure sleep remained a refuge, not a struggle. You see, the Egyptians weren't trying to conquer their environment. They were trying to harmonize with it, make friends with the air, bargain with the heat. And here's another quirky design detail you might spot as the morning fully arrives. Ceilings painted with stars. Not always elaborate, not always preserved. But in tombs, temples, and even a few domestic rooms, ceilings were dotted with constellations. Not as maps, but as memory aids. Sleep under stars, rise with purpose. A way of remembering your place in the cosmos. Even while tucked into a dusty mat. You step into full morning now. Birdsong. Light laughter from the neighboring yard. A goat bleats. Somewhere, someone drops a clay cup, and it doesn't break. Lucky them. And you? You stretch again. Not to wake up, really. Just to say thank you to your bones. To the pillow that wasn't. To the hours that pass in peace. And maybe, just maybe, to the next nap waiting in the wings. Because in Egypt, the day may have started, but sleep was never fully left behind. You find yourself walking beneath a wooden lattice, the kind that breaks sunlight into slices. The heat hasn't arrived in full yet, but you can feel it lurking, like a lion in tall grass, waiting to pounce. And with it comes a different kind of awareness. Time measured not in hours, but in shadows. You notice how short the shade is under the tamarisk tree. A signal. Midday is approaching. And that means one thing. Retreat. The ancient Egyptian midday break wasn't merely a convenience. It was a necessity. The air by this point turns viscous, the kind that clings to skin and folds into crooks of elbows. Tools are dropped. Markets go quiet. The animals lie down. And you, like everyone else, begin the sacred ritual of seeking shade. Mainstream historians refer to this period as the noonday rest or merit. It was a cultural cousin to the Mediterranean siesta. Except in Egypt, it wasn't just a nap. It was protection from both the elements and, more mysteriously, from spirits believed to awaken when the sun reached its apex. Fringe tidbit incoming. According to some temple inscriptions, the midday sun was said to split open the sky and allow certain malevolent beings a peek into the world of the living. Harmless curiosity or soul-snatching chaos? Historians still argue whether these texts were metaphorical warnings about sunstroke or they point to a deeper cosmological fear. Either way, people didn't linger under that high sun. You step back into your home, or the shaded side of a workshop, or even the corner of a courtyard with a hanging linen screen. And now comes the most underappreciated detail in the history of heat management. The second nap. Yes, ancient Egyptians were likely polyphasic sleepers. One long sleep at night, punctuated by one or even two smaller rest periods during the day. Not laziness, biology. The body simply couldn't sustain effort in such conditions. And so people accepted what modern schedules would call inefficient, a midday drift into silence. You might recline on a reed mat, now warmed by morning sun, but still holding a trace of night's coolness. A gentle breeze flutters past, carrying hints of charcoal, palm, and something vaguely floral. Perhaps the neighbor's daughter has scattered crushed myrrh on her threshold again. And here again is where the ancient Egyptians took their sleep seriously. Some wealthier homes included what we would now call a nap room, a small, shaded chamber off the main living space with no windows, thick walls, and occasionally scented oil stored nearby. There's a record of a high-ranking official who complained that his nap room was too near the poultry yard, which he deemed an insult to his station. The etiquette of a midday nap became something of an art. Servants were instructed not to speak above a murmur. Children were often encouraged to rest alongside their elders, not to recharge, necessarily, but to model the stillness of adult behavior. Even animals were included. Small dogs curled under stools, and cats, well, they napped wherever they pleased. That hasn't changed much. By now, Your body is melting a little, giving way to gravity. You might not fall fully asleep, but you're not awake either. This is the in-between, and the Egyptians respected the state. They believed that sleep, especially when brief, was a channel for clarity. Not dreams necessarily, but calm, pause, reset. And here's a charming side note. Certain temples actually had public rest pavilions. Think of them as the world's earliest nap cafes. Visitors could lie on cool stone benches under shaded colonnades, attended by temple caretakers who occasionally fanned the air or sprinkled rose water nearby. Whether this was meant for spiritual cleansing or just good hospitality is unclear. Historians still argue whether it was more religious ritual or a practical public service. You lie there, unmoving, staring at the latticework shadows dancing across the ceiling. You listen. No footsteps, no hammering, no carts. Just the rustle of linen in the wind and the occasional distant splash of water. Someone topping off a jar, trying not to waste a single drop. Time slows. You lose track of whether you've actually fallen asleep or are merely remembering what sleep feels like. And then, just as gently, it begins to shift. A cicada clicks. A door creaks. Somewhere, a soft bell or chime signals that it's now late afternoon. The worst of the heat has passed. The light isn't as aggressive. And the city, village, estate, farmstead begins to wake again. You rise slowly. Your legs feel a little fuzzy. Your mind somewhere between dreamed of ducks and need to fetch lentils. But you're not groggy. You're preserved. Now the chores resume, but at a different tempo. Bakers return to their ovens. Cloth merchants roll up screens and prepare for buyers. The scribe down the road might finally crack open papyrus scrolls and get to work. Stylists tapping in measured rhythm. It's almost like another day has begun, entirely separate from the morning one. You notice a woman drawing a wet cloth across her face. Not from sweat, just as a gesture. Cooling, cleansing. Others follow suit. And the scent of something sharp, maybe mint, maybe crushed juniper, drifts past. Refreshed. Ready? And you? You smile, because you've come to understand something the ancients knew all along. That surrendering to rest isn't a weakness. It's strategy, survival. And on days when the sun feels like a sword, a nap is your best shield. You stretch again, just for good measure. Then glance at the sky. The light is soft now, no longer glaring. Time to rejoin the world. But don't worry. There's another nap waiting later. Egypt always saves room for one more. The afternoon is drifting into early evening now, and you can feel the rhythm of the city pulsing again. Not loud, never quite loud, but lively. People are back in motion. Shadows are long, and the heat has turned from molten to bearable. You stroll down a dusty pathway between mud brick homes and pass a woman sprinkling water over the earth outside her door. Not for cleaning. No, this is a heat trick. Damp soil means evaporative cooling. A primitive air conditioner, working slowly, silently, sending the air with that delicious smell of warm dust meeting water. And tonight will be warm. Again, of course it will. But warm is not the same as unbearable. And that's when the real sleep rituals begin. See, while midday sleep was about protection, nighttime sleep in ancient Egypt was about preparation. Think of it less as rest and more like a scheduled negotiation with the divine. You didn't just collapse into bed. You arrange yourself for sleep the way a performer might for a ritual. Carefully, intentionally, and above all, with a sort of reverence that we, today, mostly reserve for charging our phones. You find your way to the sleeping area. Not a bedroom in the modern sense, more like a sleeping zone. Some families slept on rooftops, some in courtyards, others in rooms with thick walls to keep out the heat. The wealthy might have had raised sleeping platforms or wooden frames with woven leather strips. Everyone else? Reed mats, layered with linen, if you were lucky. Sometimes, they even use headrests, those curved stone or with supports that look uncomfortable until you realize they were designed to keep your face cool and your hairstyle intact. Priorities. Here's your mainstream fact. Most households shared sleeping space. Privacy was not expected or necessarily desired. Families slept together for safety, warmth, yes, even in Egypt, deserts can chill you at night, and shared ritual. There was comfort in numbers, and a sort of collective rhythm to falling asleep as a group. You breathe in. Someone 2 feet away breathes out. A child shifts. A goat sighs. But what if you didn't want to sleep right away? That's when the rituals kicked in. Evening prayers were common, sometimes whispered, sometimes sung. Gods were invoked for peaceful dreams, especially Bess and Tarit, both guardians of households and particularly of sleep. Children might be rubbed with oils or herbs to ward off nightmares. And adults? They sometimes anointed their own temples with calming balms, myrrh sweet flag, crushed lotus, intended to invite rest and keep away unclean spirits. There's one fringe tidbit from a tomb inscription near Thebes that describes a woman sleeping under a suspended dish of scented oil, meant to drip slowly overnight and calm the invisible. Whether it worked or simply made her smell excellent is unknown. Historians still argue whether this was a widespread practice or the sleep-time flex of a particularly nervous aristocrat. And remember, this was a world without harsh artificial light. Once the sun dipped behind the palm groves and the oil lamps were dimmed, the dark was truly dark. A velvety, cosmic kind of darkness that made your own breath sound like a conversation. And so, to fight off the lurking unknowns, many Egyptians embraced small, glowing symbols of safety. Amulets, for instance, placed under sleeping mats, around necks, or even tied to the big toe. Some were shaped like eyes, others like ankhs, scarabs, or the lion-headed goddess Sekhmet, because nothing says sweet dreams like the spiritual equivalent of a bodyguard with fangs. Some nights were quiet, easy, others less so, on particularly hot evenings. The city didn't sleep so much as rotate in a series of half-dozes. People rose and rearranged themselves, chasing shadows. Fans, made of palm fronds or feathers, moved slowly over faces. Children climbed onto cooler parts of the mat, and more than one adult tiptoed to the threshold to catch a breath of moving air. You pause there now, at the edge of your own sleeping space. A breeze brushes across your skin, soft, like silk, barely enough to flutter a hanging bead curtain. But you notice it. You always notice it. And you're not alone. From behind another doorway, a woman leans out to adjust a linen drape. She catches your eye, nods once, then disappears again into the dark. No words needed. Just 2 people aligned in the quiet battle against the slow heat of night. In some homes, the scent of sleep became part of the ritual. Small incense pots were placed near windows, not for burning, but to radiate the memory of smoke from earlier. Warm clay holds scent like nothing else. You inhale hints of cedar, resin, and something floral. It might just be the night-blooming jasmine sneaking in from the alley. And if you were lucky or wealthy, you might even have been lulled to sleep by music. Lullabies existed, of course, but so did more formal sleep accompaniments. The soft pluck of a lute, the distant murmur of a water carrier shifting his load, the rhythmic sound of a servant pacing with a hand fan, keeping insects at bay. If you were powerful enough, you didn't have to sleep alone, even when no one touched your mat. One noblewoman's letters describe her sound servant, a girl whose job was simply to whisper gentle observations about the stars as her mistress drifted off. We're not saying you need to hire one, but it's tempting. And the dreams? Oh, the dreams mattered. You didn't dismiss a dream in ancient Egypt. You interpreted it, discussed it, recorded it. Woke up with a snake in your vision? Depends on where it bit you. Dreamed of drowning? That could be rebirth. Or trouble. There were even professional dream interpreters. Scribes trained to tease meaning out of sleep's peculiar grammar. One mainstream scribe's guide included phrases like, dreaming of falling, one will rise, and dreaming of eating dates, beware gossip. Interpretations changed, of course. Context mattered. Historians still argue whether the interpretations were actually predictive or just a clever way to inspire introspection. And now, as the city finally quiets for real, you find your place again. On the mat, under a sky that's black and silver and trembling. You close your eyes and hear it all. The rustle of linen, the whisper of an amulet settling against skin, the faint hum of sleep beginning to bloom across a household, a city, an empire. No fans, no air conditioning, no white noise machine. Just the ritual, the rhythm, The heat, the dark, and the strange comfort of dreaming under the same stars as those who came long before. And though the night stretches wide, like a slow river pooling over stone, there's a gentle rhythm to it. Ancient Egyptians didn't merely wait for sleep to arrive. They coaxed it, guided it, like a bark drifting on the Nile. And with that, we return to the very heart of how they understood rest, not as a cessation, but a crossing. You see, in Egyptian belief, sleep was not unlike death, but not in a morbid way. More like a rehearsal, a safe version. Every night, the soul, Ba, was thought to leave the body and wander through fields, temples, sometimes the underworld. It would return by morning, usually, though not always. So every bedtime carried a tiny sliver of sacred risk. What if the soul decided not to come back? That's why prayers before sleep were so serious, so formulaic. Oh gods, guide me through night's passage. Let my body rest, my soul roam, and both return. You weren't just seeking rest. You were requesting safe passage across a cosmic threshold. Some households had a nightly recitation, led by the elder. It might go something like, "May your Ba travel with light feet. May your dreams be truthful. May your limbs awaken as they were laid down, whole, rested, and known to the gods." It sounds ceremonial, but in truth, it was ordinary, familiar, like saying sleep tight today. And speaking of limbs, there's something curious about how they slept. Archaeological evidence in tomb art suggests that Egyptians preferred a side sleeping posture, often with one arm tucked beneath the head or curved across the chest. There are even surviving depictions of people using small headrests carved to fit the angle of their necks, suggesting they valued not just sleep, but aligned, symmetrical sleep. Posture mattered. After all, the gods were watching. In fact, the idea of pleasing the gods through stillness appears in more than one funerary text. It's unclear whether this applied strictly to the afterlife or to nap time, but it's fun to imagine someone rolling over in the night, then immediately realigning themselves, just in case. And if we speak of alignment, we should talk about stars. The ancient Egyptians were astronomers, lovers of the sky, and believers in cosmic patterns. They knew the Sirius star, called Sopdet, heralded the Nile flood, that constellations rotated, that time itself whispered through celestial movement. And so, sleeping outdoors under the stars was never seen as primitive or impoverished. It was a privilege, a kind of private communion with the universe. One old kingdom priest wrote that he could tell the time from the tilt of Sopdet's gaze, which likely meant he watched the night sky pass overhead like a silent timekeeper. And many believed that to sleep beneath the stars was to borrow their calm, their order, their endless patience. So, next time you lie awake under the night sky, waiting for dreams or quiet or something in between, you can know that others did the same. Thousands of years ago, in a world without phones or alarms or glow-in-the-dark clocks. Just sky, just scent, just stillness. You can almost hear the hush of linen rustling, the soft pad of bare feet adjusting a sleeping mat, the creak of a roof beam overhead, and the sigh of someone somewhere finally slipping from this world to the next, if only for a few restorative hours. Even now, as your own thoughts quiet and slow, it's tempting to imagine your BA stretching its wings, just for a moment, just for the night. May it wander well, and return whole. Sleep, after all, is never just escape from the heat. It's a journey. And tonight, the stars are patient. Now, as your eyelids grow heavier, feel the warmth of the Egyptian night settling softly around you, like a gentle blanket woven from centuries of quiet moments. The air hums quietly with the soft whispers of lotus blossoms, mingling with the cool breath of desert sands that have long since cooled beneath the vast, starry sky. Each star above is like a tiny, distant lantern, casting a gentle, calming glow, so subtle it feels as if the night itself is breathing a lullaby just for you. The world around you slows to a serene stillness, a timeless pause as cradle countless souls before yours, under the same expansive sky. Imagine yourself lying on a simple woven mat, the texture soft beneath you, while the cool night air brushes your skin. The steady rhythm of your breathing matches the distant rustle of palm leaves and the quiet murmur of the Nile flowing somewhere beyond the horizon, a soothing pulse in the night. There is a sacred calm here, a connection to those ancient sleepers who understood that rest was more than just closing your eyes. It was a passage, a gentle journey where your soul, like the BA of old, roams freely, refreshed by the quiet mystery of dreams and darkness. And just as they awaited dawn's return, so too will you awaken renewed, whole, and wrapped in the soft glow of morning's promise. Let go of the worries of your day, the heat that clings to your skin, and the noise that chases your thoughts. Surrender to this ancient rhythm of night, to the soothing embrace of stillness, and to the quiet magic of sleep. You are part of a long, unbroken chain of dreamers, all held gently by the night's endless patience. So now, dim the lights completely, slow your breath, and let your mind drift beneath the calm canopy of stars. Feel the cool darkness wrap you like a silk shroud, soft and protective. Allow your dreams to rise softly, carrying you on the quiet currents of night. Sleep well, dear listener. May your rest be deep, your dreams kind, and your waking gentle. Good night and sweet, sweet dreams.